This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we are live on our Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube channels with Cera Gibson. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Hey, thank you for having me.
Well, we're excited because we had you on the first Peg Bedroom Producer Festival on the first
Yes.
night. It was kind of late. You did a video. And for those of you who didn't see that video, we're going to show it. But you're on the show today because you've got a brand new single coming out like Saturday.
Yes, on Saturday. I'm so excited.
And just give everybody the name of that single so I know. It's like You Don't Want My Heart. So it's YDWMH.
Yes, yes. It's just a little bit shorter. You Don't Want My Heart is a pretty long title.
But cool. See, I like the title.
Thank you.
And so that comes out on 7/31 on all the platforms, right?
Everywhere. Everywhere
Everywhere.
you can listen to music, it's there.
We're gonna get into that more, but we're gonna cue this up to actually show what we actually showed back on 7/16. Do maybe like one or two songs into it, and then we'll go and talk about your new single and what you've been doing since the last time we interviewed you.
Okay, perfect.
So we'll put you on mute when we go to play this, and then we'll come back. Okay. Right. So here we go with the Peg Bedroom performance from 7/16, our Bedroom Producer Festival.
For me, so I'm getting this all pre-recorded for you guys, and I hope you enjoy it. We have the customary farmer hat in the background and the part of the wall that was not painted because the TV used to be there. So I hope you enjoy the scenery.
Too close to know exactly what it means. The same mistakes, they aren't lost on me. Moving too fast, kissing her by the lake. Oh, her lips are soft, but it's not your taste. I don't wanna drink, I've smoked all my weed. What has gotten into me? I've been getting drunk on sadness lately. I keep getting high on the pain, it's way too easy. I wanna let myself feel it, it's twisted inside of my gut so tight. I wanna forget all the times with you. I've been getting drunk on the sadness lately. Regret, you know exactly how it feels. Somehow your letter made it all too real. Trapped in the house playing video games when there's no one there. It's just not the same. I don't wanna drink, I've smoked all my weed. What has gotten into me? I've been getting drunk on sadness lately. I keep getting high on the pain, it's way too easy. I wanna let myself feel it, it's twisted inside of my gut so tight. I wanna forget all the times with you. I've been getting drunk on the sadness lately. I've been getting drunk on sadness. take a pill, fall away from the ceiling. Never know if we're dreaming. Either we'll kill. Either we die. You know you're my moon, I'll always be your sun. I don't want to call. We got too good at pretending we won't find a happy ending. Hey, you, pull my hat off like a wolf and make a cloak. Let it warm you when you think that you might choke. Let it dry in the sun. When it's used up and spun, just don't let me go. I will die. You know you're my moon, I'll always be your sun. I don't want to call. We got too good at pretending we won't find a happy ending. But when I, as you are right now, I have all these years of locked and down. No one will love you as you are right now. Every little detail I've written down.
Back, and let me get back to the main screen. How you doing?
We're back.
Yeah, we're back.
Great.
So I wanted to give people a little flavor of what you had done. And we appreciated that you gave us those performances. So let's get into like where you are today from the last time we talked to you and your new single coming out on Saturday.
Yeah, well, where I am today, so I finished a bunch of music that I had written last year. I started writing it at the end of 2019, but like with the pandemic, it really slowed down the process. So now we're more than halfway into 2021 and it's finally done. So I'm super excited. The song that I'm putting out on Saturday is actually the first song that I wrote of this chunk. And I did kind of want to release them chronologically. So I'm going to release a few and then they're going to be out on an album with additional music and everything. But I felt it important to release them chronologically because they carry it, like you can see the journey of emotion throughout them. So, yeah.
So that's awesome. So is it part of is this gonna be part of a bigger project, like an EP or an album?
Yes, it is going to be part of a bigger project. I'm just going to put a few out, breadcrumbs, and then the full project will be out later this year.
Yeah, because this is like the age of the Spotify like playlist. So, but
Yes.
I do see a lot of people doing EPs and albums seem to be coming back.
Yes.
That seems to be the new thing. That well, I'm kind of an experimental artist, so I always do like 7-minute songs.
Yeah.
So my stuff is kind of like going back to Pink Floyd. So I'm like, I'm not in the zone. Yeah, it's cool that you've So do you have a video and everything for this coming?
Yes, there will be a video coming, not on the release date, but later. Yes. And there will be corresponding videos to pretty much all of the songs. I love doing that. Like if people go check out my music, I love to just make videos for everything, even if it's just some weird little visual, because my writing process is so visual. Like when I'm writing the song, I'm seeing the song, so I like to involve the audience in that as well.
Well, I think today, especially since people can't perform in a lot of places yet, that doing a YouTube video or making a MPEG-4, it seems to be kind of like what we need to do as artists to engage the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's why I'm doing this. I used to just do audio podcasts, and now
Yeah.
I do these video podcasts because it engages the audience more.
Yes.
So they like to be able to see the artist instead of just hear them. I mean, there's still an audience that likes to hear it, in their headphone. And so we do that. We still do that, but yeah, the visual seems to be really important. And if you've got ideas visually, then that's kind of cool. So, I mean, how much effort do you work with video producers and film directors and like storyboard it out from your own ideas?
Yeah, so I mean the only video that was like genuinely storyboarded from front to back was the one for my song Sad Bitch. That because that took pretty extensive like setup, you know. We
Yeah.
had to rent a snake and get all these costumes for backup dancers and stuff. So it required a ton of planning. But typically what I do is I take my song and my idea and what I want to do, and I allow the director a fair amount of creative freedom.
Hmm.
And thankfully, I've always worked with people who ended up doing pretty much exactly what I had in my head or something even better. So yeah, I like to work hand in hand with people. There was a time where I was a bit of a control freak and I like wanted my hands in everything, but I found that that actually makes everything slightly less good than it could be if I worked with people where that's their expertise, you know? So it's been a lot better that way.
Yeah, I think it's like, being a producer or like a singer songwriter, you tend to control a lot, you know.
Yes.
But then sometimes you have to let it go, like let it go, like you let the recording engineer decide to mix, on the master, but you make a final say. But it's like there's a
Hmm.
lot of things sometimes like, well, I wasn't trained to do that. So I mean I have my ideas of what I think it should sound like. And I think sometimes it's cool to let people do what they're good at, especially if they don't make it, you know, not what you want. If they just embellish it and take you and make it a better you
Yes.
instead of like turn it into somebody else. That the people who turn it into somebody else, I'm not so into that.
No, see, I have no interest in that, but I like, I work with people that share my same vision. They're just better at those things than I am. Because I put out my EP, Crushed Velvet, at the end of 2019, like the end of the summer.
Mhm.
And I was way too involved in the mixing and mastering process, and it made it take so much longer. And I mean, I learned a lot, don't get me wrong, but since taking a step back and letting someone else mix and master my stuff, I mean, it's better. Like, there's definitely a certain element of like, you can feel me in the mix in that EP. You
Mhm.
really can. But, he's DK, who is, my mixer and mastering engineer. He's brought just a totally different life to my music that I wouldn't have been able to bring. So it's awesome to see.
Yeah, it's kind of like George Martin with the Beatles, because
Yeah,
like he comes in and he took the four lads from Liverpool, and he
yeah.
gave them this like sheen on top of what they were doing, right? And then
Hmm.
and he just embellished and got you got John Lennon and McCartney's ideas to actually get out of their head and onto the tape, you know.
Exactly.
And that's what you want, is you want somebody who can take your idea and actually make it better than what you thought it was going to be.
Yes, I always want to work with people that do a better job than I could do. And I mean, there's so much learning there, but it's exactly like what you said. It's like you take what is already there and you put like this glossy sheen on it, and it's like, ooh, it's just so satisfying. Like when I get a master back, I'm like, oh my goodness, like it just hits the ears right. And
Yeah.
like when you're working with someone who really knows what they're doing, it's like I'll say one thing, I'll be like, just lower the mids and the bass and I'm happy, and like that's it, and then I can just move on. And I'm, being less involved in that process lets me focus on the creativity of like the vocal and the writing itself a little bit more.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like if you're an artist, if you're so into every little piece of it,
Yeah.
then it's harder to like give your all, because you've got so
Yes.
many hats in the game. You're wearing so
Hmm.
many hats. It's like, okay, like, did I really do the best vocal? Because I was spending too much time trying to get the snare drum right.
Yes.
I spent like 6 months trying to get the hi hat, and then I
I've
forgot about
done
my
that.
vocal.
Oh my gosh, I have one song away, and I rewrote that song, the instrumental, rearranged the entire thing 3 times, which is just wild. And I think one day I literally just sat down and worked on that song for 8 hours and didn't even get up to pee. Like that was it, this crazy tunnel focus. And I found, okay, I can be focusing more on my performance and like really getting my voice exactly where I want it to be. So I found with this new music and this new approach that I've taken, my vocal performance is like more than I thought I was going to do, because all my focus has gone into that. And so these are the best vocals I've done on 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 these new songs because of that.
Well, I think it's really interesting. Well, I was talking to somebody, like I had another podcast tonight, and we were talking to a vocalist, and we had a bunch of people who were like, musicians, like bass players and guitar players and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like your voice is an instrument,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you can treat it as such. And and a lot of people, that are like, oh well, I'm a guitar player, I'm a keyboard player. We're like, but the voice is the thing that everybody, like, that's where the lyrics are, that's where the song, that's where the melody is, that's where the hook is, right?
Yeah.
That's core
Hmm.
to the song. And and you really, as much effort as you can put into making sure that you have like that at the the full attention it deserves.
Yes.
Because some bands, that don't, they're like alternative bands or punk bands, like, okay, vocals aren't their thing.
Yeah.
It's like the attitude is their thing.
Yeah.
And I get it. I talk to tons of people. But yeah, I mean, it's cool when you actually have somebody that has the voice is the thing. It's like, goes back to like Frank Sinatra. Goes back to the old golden age where voices were the thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I am a musician. Like I play guitar and I play piano and, I do produce, like, and I co-produce everything that I make, right? But ultimately, I am a vocalist and a writer. So, I mean, I would say that like I am masterful in my craft of vocals, but not masterful as like a pianist or a guitarist. Like I'm like proficient, but not masterful because one, I mean, having a full-time job and like going through school and everything, it's like you have to focus on the one thing, but that's also the thing I'm most passionate about. And I feel like now, especially like I'm 25, my voice has really matured in the last few years. You can hear how much work I've put into it. And so I do like to showcase that in the arrangements. And I found that the average music consumer, and even myself a few years ago before I knew much about production and mixing and mastering, they want to hear certain things, they just don't know what they're listening to that they like. And I found that it's the vocal, it's the bass, and it's the lead instrument, and all of those things need to have their pocket, they need to sit in a nice little space. And so what I strive for with my instrumental is to find balance amongst all of those things so that they are all appreciated properly. I feel like in some ways, like in the past, I lost that for a little bit, but I also feel like music in general these days has lost it a little bit because the way like pop music specifically is produced is like very cookie cutter in the mix. Right?
Yeah.
We have our lows here, we have our highs here, we have our mids here, not considering that with each vocalist, with each musician, the highs and the mids and the lows, they hit the ears differently. And so what I've been working on is figuring out where my highs, mids, and lows sit and how I can incorporate the instrumental around my voice since that's my main instrument.
That's what makes you Cera Gibson. And that's why I think people have forgotten, like, why were the Carpenters the way they were, right? Why was like the Captain and Tennille the way they were? Back in the 70s, it's like everybody kind of hit the pocket, right?
Yeah.
People produced their songs and they not everybody's trying to copy each other.
Mm-hmm.
We had the Monkees and the Beatles, like, fine. But you have a lot of people who are actually doing very unique things.
Yes.
It's not the same as the Beatles. It's not the same as like Yes. It's not the same as Zepp. Not the same as any of these other bands. Like and so you have people being allowed to experiment. People being allowed to do 3 albums before they actually hit. Stay on the label 3-4 albums before they get kicked off the label. So people were able to do really cool things that today is like it's all got to be like so tight and so controlled that in the certain area of the chart, like I tend to focus like on the part of the chart where people are able to be more experimental.
Yeah, I think experimentation really, I mean, it's starting to come up more because people are starting to make music independently of labels. Like we have resources like TikTok and other platforms where people are able to go viral on their own and, substantiate their own career before they partner with a label, because it ends up being more of a partnership when you already have your own following, because it's like you need each other as opposed to like you desperately need a label type of thing. It's like if you don't have a leg to stand on, then the label can take advantage of you and throw you around
Yeah.
however way they want. But if you do, and you do have a leg to stand on, like there's more room for you to experiment. But like I'm seeing that in pop music, and you know, some of it is like funny to me, like kind of corny, because it's like, teenagers come up and I'm 25 and am slightly removed from that now. And so I'm like, I'll listen to a song where some 17-year-old's like, I'm never gonna love again. I'm like, yes, you are. And so sometimes it makes me laugh, but I also deeply appreciate it. Like I'm seeing in pop music like this resurgence of punk a little bit.
Yeah. Always
Yeah,
like,
yeah, no, I love it. Like we're seeing it with like Willow Smith and Halsey and that new girl that's coming up that has the good for you, you look happy and healthy.
oh yeah.
I can't remember her name, but she recently came up and you can like it has punk influences and you can even hear like lyrically like in Billie Eilish's music, these punk influences, and so it's nice to see these kids break the mold. And I mean, so much has already been done to really get experimental. You got to get really weird,
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not as massively marketable, but even just seeing the fusion of genres is encouraging for the future of music, because it was getting kind of weird there for a second, just ultra contrived.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see, the idea that I'm a big fan of like progressive rock sound, like Yes and Genesis.
Yes.
I'm a synthesis, right? So I'm like, look, Keith Emerson, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know Who and Floyd. So when I see bands that actually are doing like full concepts, right? They're actually
Yeah.
going out and they got a big stack of Moogs and they got a Hammond B3 and they actually are playing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and they're doing like more than a 3 minute song. They're trying to do rock operas, or they're trying to do interesting things that would have been done in 74 or 76.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I live anyway. And the people who listen to me, that's what they want to hear. But that it's kind of a niche, but it's cool to see
Yeah.
people actually coming back into that niche, kind of have that Kurt Cobain kind of punk aesthetic,
Yes.
the kind of Eddie Vedder punk aesthetic coming in, or even having like a Blondie aesthetic. You like coming in and say, hey, I'm going to be new wave and I'm going to have a punk aesthetic and I'm going to have this kind of
Yeah.
feel like garbage, or just come, they're going to come in with this kind of new romantic thing with a little bit of a punk edge, which gives
Yeah.
you like that kind of interesting thing where you can go anywhere, because once
Yeah.
you bring keyboards into it, you can actually be like a New Order or like the Cure or Depeche Mode and kind of go different directions
Hmm.
and not be as predictable. You can do something a little dark, or you can do something a little lighter. You can bounce around.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like, it's cool to see. I don't know if you follow Miley Cyrus much, and
Yeah.
but she's been covering a lot of rock music. She recently put out a cover of Nothing Else Matters that was crazy. It was like the craziest collab ever. You'd have to check it out. And I mean, Nothing Else Matters. Metallica's my favorite band, and like, you can't really touch the original, but it was amazing to see, and it was just cool to see so much passion put into it from this pop artist, and she genuinely has like a rock voice these days.
Yeah.
And
She's
so I love
experimental.
to see it. No, she
Yeah.
is. And she does,
Willing to
like,
do
you listen.
different things.
Yeah, well, you listen to her albums and it's like so many different things, but it's all done really well. And like the older she gets, the more masterful she becomes in her craft. That's what you would hope. Like people say that no album's ever better than an artist's first album, and I don't think it has to be that way. I think it should get better every time, and I feel like that's what she's done. And she is bringing rock to these young kids.
Yeah.
And I love to see it. I want to see organic instruments again. Like the music I'm putting out now, it's not organic instruments because it was a COVID album
Yeah.
and it was done on a computer. But moving forward, I've written all this new music and I want to get back to those organic instruments. And there's always this anxiety of like, people don't listen to like rock music anymore. And they are though.
They
And
will. They will if it's good. Like I was listening to some
yeah.
bands like Hamburg, Germany, and they were this like really powerful rock band, and they were just getting into it, and I'm like, wow. And it's like in different areas of the world, it's like rock is still there, and there are people who believe in it,
Yeah.
and they'll sound like a Metallica, or they'll sound like the Clash, or they sound like the Who, but they're like
Hmm.
they're them. and they're inspired by the Who.
Yeah.
To me, the Who are like the original punks. They had
Yeah.
this they had this punk aesthetic that wasn't like Zepp. The Who are a little looser than Zepp, and they kind of just have this kind of Clash like feel before the Clash, and that was always appealing to me as a young kid. Like my first band was like a punk rock band,
Yeah,
with
that's
in a bass,
great.
and we were just trying to play, tons of like Clash songs and Sex
That's
Pistols
so
songs,
great.
and that's where I started. And I always have an appreciation for like really heavy rock,
Yeah.
because I think it gives you the ability to kind of be honest. You may not have to have a perfect pitch if you're doing like a heavy metal song or a punk
Yeah.
song, but it's kind of like it's the passion that you have that means you don't have to have the perfect pitch or the best vocal, but you believe in what you're saying or
Hmm.
what you're singing or what you're trying to put down. And I think
Yeah, definitely.
that's infectious.
It is infectious, and that's why I've always been more appreciative of like the where the writing is coming from in a song. Um, like I remember when I was young, my dad was always super into like Christina Aguilera and Mariah Carey and like Heart and just like these crazy female vocalists. And like
Mhm.
I naturally have these low vocal cords, like I get real low down here. And I have a higher register, but it took me a long time to build that up and like
That's great.
strengthen that because it didn't come naturally to me. Now, it's different. But it didn't come naturally at the time. And so my dad was so focused on like these big belty vocals. And so that's what I was focused on. I'm like, oh, I need to be this like big
Trying to sound like Heart.
belter. Yeah, I was trying to like really like barracuda, and I didn't have the biology to do that, so I was getting frustrated. And I remember I went to my first real vocal coach, and she was like, "You don't need to do that. A vocal can be powerful because of the emotion behind the vocal. You don't
Yeah,
need to be like screaming." And I mean, I was screaming. Christina and Mariah and Hart, they're not screaming,
yeah,
but I was trying to get to this point that I wasn't able to hit, and that was bringing out screaming. She's like, no, focus on the emotion, and you can hear that nuance in your voice. And even if you're singing quieter or lower in your lower register, people are connecting with the emotion in the song. And that kind of goes back to, because I have like this creative mindset, and then I have this very salesy mindset as well, because you kind of have to have that business side.
mhm,
And it's like people buy emotionally, right? You see an ad, you connect with it for some reason, and you buy emotionally. And really the same thing goes with music. And so that's why I think punk was so like in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, like people gravitated to it so much, not because it was like the most incredible guitar, the most incredible vocal. It was because of the emotion behind it, and people
yeah.
collectively
Yeah, you listen to Queen,
related to it.
yeah, you listen to like Nirvana, Kurt, or you listen to Pearl Jam, or even Green Day. It was the
Yeah.
passion, the passion that like, okay, I'm not trying. Not that Motley Crue and Rat and all those bands are cool, but
Yeah, they're cool.
when you come in with like a Kurt Cobain, he's kind of like a John Lennon and a punk at the same
Yeah.
time, and he's saying this profound stuff,
Grungy.
and he's got this like he believes in what he's doing, and so then
Yeah.
you believe it, and and he's just like so into the purity of it, right? And he didn't care if it was going to make money. It happened to make a lot of money, but he
Yeah.
was kind of punk, like a lot of punks on Sub Pop. They didn't care, but his stuff
Yeah.
was so good, and it kind of he didn't want it to be that big, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's a lot of times that's what happens with punks. Like they don't really want it to get that big. They kind of want to stay on Sub Pop. They want to stay on like a small SST label or something. They never want to get bigger than that because they think that's like selling out. And but it's because they want to have the purity of the idea that
Yeah.
they're not trying to be the Who. They're not trying to be Queen. They're not trying to be one of the big Iron Maiden or something. They're trying to be what they think is legitimate. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, no, literally. I mean, I was a huge fan of Nirvana growing up. I always listened to them, and what I was so attractive to me is like there's so much room in Nirvana's music to hear the lyrics, to hear the words.
Right.
Foo Fighters was my other favorite band growing up, and they have the same thing. And the way that the lyrics were crafted is it was so interesting. It's like you didn't necessarily understand exactly what he was getting at all the time until you'd listened to the song a few times and like really tuned into the emotion. But the imagery was so unique that he would say, like heart-shaped box,
Yeah. Yeah,
I've been
man.
drawn into your tar pit trap, right? It's like just these combinations of words that were not cliche at all, and so I really appreciated that because like it was evoking a unique mental image. It's like you were getting a little peek into his mind and his mind alone because they weren't trying to attract mass appeal.
No,
But
yeah, he wasn't just singing about boyfriend, girlfriend. He was actually
yeah,
doing kind of like a Lennon McCartney singer songwriter. He was a big fan of Lennon, and
yeah,
and his producers realized it, and they tried to kind of guide him to take his lyrics. I was watching this behind the music, and they would say, "Hey, you ought to use this Beatle chord. That you ought to take that lyric idea and embellish it, and not just like be a punk like about it and just like trash it out. Just like you've got some really good stuff here." And they concentrated on getting him
hmm
to realize how good a songwriter he was.
yeah, you excellent.
And he's one of the best of his generation. I mean, he's like epitomizes grunge, and made it more than just like punk. It's really powerful, rock music as good as anything the Beatles did.
No, it is. And like people make fun of it now. I mean, anytime something gets really popular, people make fun of it, right? But people make fun of it because like so many of the chord progressions are the same with Nirvana and it's like similar rhythmically. But each song has such a distinct footprint in terms of how it was written and even the way that it was sung. And so it's like I can listen to every album, every song back to back. And even with those similar themes, it doesn't get old and it doesn't drag on because each song has such a specific footprint.
Yeah, they have their unique kind of footprint sound. Like, reggae has a sound. Like
Hmm.
the Clash have a footprint, right? That sounds like Mick Jones. He's doing this thing, right? And
Yeah.
you hear the Clash, and you're like, oh, that's Mick. And you can hear Joe Strummer doing his lyric. It's like nobody sings like that. And
Hmm.
it's like it's not it's like it's almost like, well, maybe it's not singing, but then it works. It's like Dylan.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you get like a Strummer, Joe Strummer is like Dylan. It's like either you like him or you don't. But if you think it's good, I mean, it's like brilliant, the stuff that works. And then you're like,
Yeah.
wow. And when somebody has that kind of footprint, and it's not like a 5 octave voice like Mariah Carey or Whitney
Yeah.
Houston, but Joe Strummer, like that works with the Clash, like nobody else can
Yeah.
do. And Kurt Cobain
Exactly.
with his stuff is like that works.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's not that they're not like good at singing. Like they are on key. It's just not like the voice itself, like the range isn't the impressive part,
The
And I would
passion.
even say, yeah, I would even say that like Billy Joel and Leonard Cohen kind of fall into that category as well. Of it's like the voice is a vehicle for the story that they're getting across, and you're getting
Mhm,
such a genuine story. Like Chelsea Hotel, that's such a beautiful story. Or like
mhm.
Vienna by Billy Joel, it's
Yeah.
like
Well,
they're
Billy's
just
awesome.
really
But Billy
beautiful.
he's got this range, and he knows his limitations.
Yeah.
But like within his capability, he's a great singer songwriter,
Yes.
and he's got some songs that like I love some of the stuff that from Turnstiles. I'm like I listen to that thing over and over and over,
Hmm.
just because I like good songwriting. If I listen
Yeah.
to like Todd Rundgren, I'll go listen to like Something Anything. Like that album is like, and his voice is kind of like that too. It's like it's not super range, but it's like him.
Yeah.
Like Hello, It's Me is a great song. And then when you listen to it, it actually has errors in it. It you
Hmm.
know, it has like mistakes in it.
Yeah.
But it's like because of those mistakes, it's a classic song. Today they would never let it out. the way it was
Yeah.
done. But
Well,
they would correct it.
yeah, well that's what I was saying earlier is it's so cookie cutter now and everything is like almost too perfect and I'm guilty of that as well where I'm trying to now get back to like let's have less perfect vocals. Like one of my songs that I'm going to be putting out, there's a part where my voice cracks in a song and I just liked it there because I felt like it worked with the emotion even though it was just my vocal being like this is the fifth take of this one part, you know.
Sometimes
But
it works, you listen to
it
Stone songs,
works.
you can hear the errors that there's an error from Mick, or there's
Yeah.
Keith is a little off with the drummer, but it's like it works.
Yeah, well, you hear that in Pantera. They refuse to use a metronome, which I love metronomes. Like, I just
Mhm.
love it because my brain likes the little box. But like, it's still great. Like the imperfect nature of it, or like the song "Mr. Moonlight" by the Beatles.
Yeah,
I can't remember who, but his voice cracks like intensely. But it just
yeah,
adds to it, and it makes it fun and it's memorable. So I like the
yeah.
imperfectness
I think the
there.
happy accident. I think they call them happy accidents, and a
Yes.
lot of times, if you're in the world of the DAW, which is great for musicians, it helps a lot of EDM. It helps a lot of pop people. They can't get to the studio. But the one thing I always try to say is like be a hybrid. Like do some rough stuff, right? Maybe take your vocal from your phone, and if that's the best one, don't fix it. You know, T-
Yeah.
go and take your bass guitar and play and be a little off, but that being off actually sounds better than doing the bass on the grid. You
Yeah.
know,
I mean, I do have a song that I made that didn't fit on a traditional grid, so we just went with it. And like I wrote it on the piano and it was just super funky, but like it ended up being cool. And then I used a vocal sample. I made a vocal sample out of a voice memo. I just recorded a voice memo, not good quality, but me and my producer turned it into the coolest vocal sample in the background. It's actually in my song Drunk on Sadness, which was the first song that, if people have been listening since the beginning, it was the
Mhm.
first song that was shown. And yeah, that vocal sample in there was on my phone. Made it on my phone.
That's the thing is like Jack White uses like a cheap $100 plastic guitar.
Yeah. I
And
love
it,
Jack White.
and you don't. And he's like, I saw some documentaries. Like, I could use one of my $5,000 guitars and one of my $10,000 guitars, but on this track, I use like $100 Sears and Roebuck guitar. And it doesn't really matter because, like, if you can play, you can play. And like
Yeah.
sometimes people obsess about what they're using, and it's like you could use a Casio, you could use a wood block, you know, instead of using a 707 or you a 727. It's like you can just go do something, and it's like as long as you're passionate about it and it fits, like it has to serve the song. So
Yeah.
I'm an analog guy, but if I've got a digital synth and I got a sample like and that serves the song, that serves the song. But if my Moog serves the song, I'm going to use my Moog. You know,
Yeah, I always say if it sounds good, it is good. Like it doesn't matter if it like it doesn't matter if it is like like the best quality instrument or whatever. So I have this incredible Breedlove Atlas guitar, and I freaking love that thing. It's my prized possession. But I also have this dinky little $200 Fender acoustic, and sometimes that hits
it,
harder
it's
than
what
my
you want.
Breedlove, and it's evoking what I want out of the instrument. It's like giving this different, it's just a different quality. And so it's like I totally don't pass up cheap instruments or different ways of doing things or a phone recording because sometimes that's what it needs. Sometimes that's what hits.
Yeah, I mean that's the interesting thing today is like I think people want to be authentic and they want to pick what's going to work, but then you got people who want to just repeat success, right? It's like they want to take like Ice Ice Baby, they want to take a Queen song and then say they changed it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not really different. That's pretty much the same thing. um,
Yeah.
so, but my big thing is like, okay, try to be as original as you can. It doesn't really matter what you use, as long as you've got that kind of punk aesthetic, whether you're punk or not. But if you come into something like you listen to like, I was listening to this great soul singer that passed away,
Mm.
Charles Bradley, I believe, and his delivery is so guttural. It's like Otis Redding. And he just like does this like really powerful
Yeah.
soul song, and he did these songs. They're kind of like James Brown, but they're not. It's like him, and
Hmm.
he had this like take on it, and it's like retro soul, but he believed in what he was doing, and he suddenly, when he was like 65, he got famous,
Yeah.
and then he passed away, but he was able to believe in what he was doing, and he didn't give up. And I always tell like younger artists that like, oh, I'm gonna give up if I don't make it. I mean, look at Charles Bradley. He kept on going. He was like 65 when he made it.
Yeah, I think it's hard because in the industry, to like branch off of the topic a little bit, from the time that I was like 17 when I started recording and I went to Nashville and like really started to make music seriously, industry executives were constantly telling me like, you got to make it now, you got to make it before you're 25, like young, 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 you got to be a child, you know? And I'm finding now, I'm 25 and I'm so much better than I was when I was 17. And I gave up an opportunity back then that would have, made me famous or whatever because they wanted to change me and turn me into someone I wasn't. And I wasn't going to have any creative control. And now it's like, when I was 17, I was like, if I don't make it by the time I'm 25, then I'm done. And now I'm 25 and I'm like, this is the best I've ever been. Like it would have been a shame to make it sooner than that. Whereas like now I have so much to offer creatively and artistically. And like in the industry, they do like to push this idea of like women have an expiration date. It's like, if you don't make it by 30, there's no way. But again, we're seeing that change because of the internet, because people have more autonomy. They're able to go viral on their own, where you can be authentic. You can find your audience, this niche audience even, and push yourself. And so age is less of a barrier now. So that anxiety of needing to make it or like make it or break it type of thing is gone for me because I recognize I just keep getting better. Why does there have to be a finish line when I'm so young, you know?
That's true. I mean, one of the big female artists I was always into was like Liz Phair with
Yeah.
her Exile and Guyville, and she just like she was gonna do it her way from the beginning,
Yeah.
and she just put out a brilliant album. She's like at the age where these guys say you're not supposed to be able to do it, right? And she always proves it. She's
Yeah.
always coming out and it's like, oh, well, she decided to go and make a pop album, and she did it. She
Yeah.
went back and did back to like Exile and Guyville type stuff, girly sound stuff. She does whatever she wants. If she wants to do something that's poppy, she does it. She wants to do something lo-fi, she does it. And I'm really into that. Cause I kind of grew up with like the Juliana Hatfields, and the Liz Phairs and and bands like Wild Flag and a lot of the female artists that are kind of female centered like rockers,
Yeah.
girly, like Riot Girl bands.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Right, girl.
I love Riot Girl punk bands. Like I like I like the old Joan Jett.
Oh, I love it.
in that kind of feel because I think it's cool. You listen to the original Blondie, and that stuff is
Hmm.
like it kicks. I mean, it's so good. I mean, I go listen to Blondie records like all the time because
Hmm.
I'm a new wave guy. So I'm gonna and they just represent this new wave thing where their albums are like all over the place. They have
Hmm.
all different types. They got punk, they got reggae, they got rap, they got like everything. And I'm like that. That's kind of like, oh yeah, it's like I wish people would do more of that.
Well, same, and that's why I love that Miley Cyrus does that so much, that she's been like super weird in the past for sure, but she always is authentic, always does exactly what she wants to do. And for me, it's always been very inspiring of like, oh, you can be like a pop mainstream artist, but also not be that at all. And it's because people attach more so to the person as opposed to all like them having a specific sound. And
Yeah.
that is so harped upon, having a sound, having a brand. It's like, well, the brand is you. And there does need to be a level of separation because you need to click into a character a little bit. It's like people are a little bit all over the place. So it's like if you can take who you are in a certain moment and like encapsulate it and then market it, that's awesome. But it doesn't mean it needs to stay the same. You
Yeah.
just always need to be authentic and always be trying to put out your best work.
Yeah, you need to do like what Bowie and Lady Gaga did, what do. Like
Yeah.
Bowie was able to be the chameleon, you know.
Yes. Oh, very
He
much so.
Bowie is like is like the roadmap if you want to do it the way you want, because he could be, I could be the Thin White Duke, I could be Ziggy, I can be Aladdin Sane, So
Hmm.
he would just change. Right?
Yeah.
He would, go in to do something with Luther Vandross after he had done Ziggy. He'd go
Yeah.
and do something with Stevie Ray Vaughan when he did Let's Dance.
Yeah.
So he could just jump around, and he didn't know. People would say, "Well, what I thought you were like a glam rocker." Boy, that was one version of Bowie is a glam
Yeah.
rocker. Another version of Bowie is the guy singing with Luther Vandross.
Yeah.
So
And it's
it's
super
like,
psychedelic and weird and
yeah, it just
just
gives you
goes
this
round and round.
roadmap where you can
Yeah.
like, okay, now I can see I could do it whatever I want, you know?
Yeah, no, it's great. And it's like people do that. And I was talking to an executive at Big Machine years and years ago. And I was telling him that. I'm like, I want to just be so painfully myself in my music while still, of course, recognizing, like market needs. I like to bridge the gap there. I like to do that. Um, and he was like, David Bowie did this, Led Zeppelin did this. I would bring up these, and he's like, well,
Oh, you froze a little bit. Oh, what happened?
uh,
There you go.
are you
You're back.
there?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, it
Your
lost
signal
me.
froze. Your signal froze. I don't know. It's like a net problem.
Yeah, something it dropped a little bit. But yeah, so I would be like, I was talking to this executive and I was saying, I want to do this. Like David Bowie did this, Led Zeppelin did this. And he was like, well, they're the exception. And I'm like, well, do they need to be the exception? Does it have to be the exception? Because there was a time when it wasn't the exception.
Yeah, I don't
So,
believe it's the exception. I always push back
no.
on that. It's like you want it to be a certain way. But
Yeah.
if you check what people are doing, tons of people did, kind of like those things. And then you say it's
Yeah.
the exception. Like they say, well, Bohemian Rhapsody is the exception. You know, that Hotel California is the exception because we only do 3-minute songs. You
Yeah.
know, but the fact is, there's tons of songs that are not 3 minutes, and
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and so the idea that they have to all be 3 minutes is not the rule. It's an artificial rule made by people who don't have the imagination.
No, and I mean, people use the argument of people don't have the attention span these days, but that's not true because a lot of platforms actually have to amend to accommodate long form content. Like TikTok added a 3-minute video capability, and like Instagram started off with 15-minute videos, and it ended up being 1 minute, and now you have Instagram TV where you can upload hours and
Yeah,
hours because people do want long form content. They want something long. There's this song called Thinking of a Place by The War on Drugs, one of my other favorite bands. This song is just exceptional. It's 10 minutes. And every time I listen to it all the way through because every part of it is incredibly crafted. It takes you on a journey. Like it'll come back and then pull you back in. And
yeah.
like,
There's
it's
still a lot of
beautiful.
bands that do that. I mean, there's a lot of hip hop bands that have concept albums that that that
Yeah,
that it's not just one Spotify single. People go listen to Tyler Creator or Igor.
he's a concept
It's
artist.
all the way through. They listen to the brand new one he just did all the way through. They listen to Earl Sweatshirt. They listen to Kendrick Lamar. They do so. The idea in rock music that you can't do that. Well, maybe you haven't crafted something that will drive somebody's attention, but the hip hop audience
Exactly.
will actually listen to a 55-minute album the whole way through. And
Yeah.
so that's
And
the
like
idea
every
that you
time they
can't,
listen.
yeah, so the idea that you can't do that is not correct because you can get people to do it. So it's a matter
It's
of,
true.
do you have the imagination and the creative skill to get your audience engaged at that level? You know,
Yeah. Exactly. And it's like you want to make a song where even if it's 10 minutes, it ends and they want to repeat it. They don't want the song to end. And so that's honestly what the truth is it's not that a 4-minute or 5-minute song is too long. It's that perhaps you haven't crafted something that is drawing the attention throughout the length of the song. And I like to make short songs. I make long songs occasionally, like around 4.5 minutes.
Mhm.
But I like shorter songs. I like little bite size, like 250, like 310
Well, it's the
songs.
classic kind of, you think about Motown. All the classic Motown songs are in that kind of range. You know,
Yeah.
all the stacked songs. So I'm a bit. I actually, with my ghost songs tend to go 7-8 minutes. But lately, I've been kind of listening to a lot of Motown stacks and thinking, okay, well, what if I try to look at what those guys were doing and do
Mhm.
a modern take on, okay, they can complete the thought in 3 minutes, and it's like it works. And
Mhm.
so like look at what they did, and just take the spirit of what they did and try to craft it at that level, and so
Yeah.
it takes a lot of work to get something to work, in 3 minutes that people want to keep on listening to, in the same way they listen
Yeah.
to something like 8 minutes. If you can get somebody to go back and listen to like, like a classic Motown song, like anything that Marvin Gaye did, it's like, he just had the ability to get you sucked into it. And then you like, wow,
Exactly.
I'm on that riff, I'm on that melody. I'm like, I love that delivery. It's like that's what you want. I like the way the cymbals are going and the tambourines. Like
Mhm.
every piece of the song, the way they EQ'd those songs, you can hear like certain things being brought out. You hear these
Yes.
on the drums, you hear like the snare, or you hear the kick, or you hear tambourine at the right moment. You hear like the percussion coming in, and they're very well orchestrated. And that's the
Yes.
kind of thing I'm like, I love that about classic pop music is you listen to the really good classics, you can hear where the engineers and everybody picked in the mix. Like you said, the mid range and the low, they picked the right moments for the right instruments at the right time.
Exactly. And that is the true craft of mixing. But no, I totally agree. I think it takes just as much skill to get a full thought across in under 3 minutes as it does to keep someone's attention for 10 minutes. It's just a different thing that you're executing, right? It's like certain things don't need to drag on that long. Like sometimes I write a song and it makes sense for it to be 2 minutes and then like add instrumental breaks in there.
Mhm.
And something about that thinking of a play song by the War on Drugs is what is actually sung in the song could fit into a 3 minute song really easily. Like the point is made really early on, but that's not the point of the song. It's the instrumental composition that frames those words that makes it so exceptional, that draws you through the song because the majority of it is just guitar and drums and these atmospheric elements that make it so beautiful. So it depends on what the song needs, what the message needs.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me when I listen to like Wilco or Radiohead, and
Yes.
they'll have like a core thing that maybe that could have been a 2 minute song, but it went like 6, 7 minutes.
Mhm.
But because like Wilco and those bands are still kind of like progressive rock bands, they're kind of like Genesis and Yes, they can extend a song. They have these really amazing solos. They have these really amazing parts, and they do key changes. They go
Yeah.
they kind of like Floyd, they like the classic rock bands, but they're
I love
more
key
modern.
changes.
Yeah, they're more into the modern version of these bands
Yeah.
that can sustain an audience attention, and they don't have like big hits like Wilco and Radiohead are not getting these big hits anymore. But if they showed up and they'd fill a stadium because
Yeah.
people want to see bands that can do that. You know,
Mhm.
they can actually entertain you with actual kind of classic this musicianship.
Yeah, like if you can be fully entertained by an instrumental, that is so incredible. There's this song, oh my God, it's by Garth something. It's not Garth Brooks. He plays the cello, and holy cow, he has this whole album of just cello. I actually want to see if I can
Yeah,
uh Southern Sea, Garth. I think it's Garth. Um, see song. Okay. Yes. Who is this by? Okay, Garth Stevenson. Yeah. So he has this whole album, which is just insanely freaking beautiful. It has songs like Dark Red, Earth, A Love Song, Reflection, Dusk, an
wow.
hourglass, and it's like just with a freaking cello. He so perfectly captures that theme, and I can listen to this whole cello album of just cello, front to back, and it doesn't get old because the emotion, the way you would with a vocal, is in the cello. Just like I can listen to these really long Metallica solos and
Mhm.
riffs, like in The One, because the guitar playing, like Kurt just
Yeah,
he's
he's brilliant. I mean,
the
I
juice
love.
is in there.
Yeah, I love the Metallica because they had their own style and then they refined it,
Yes.
and they got it from this kind of thrash metal to be
Yes.
this kind of pop metal that still had the thrash elements, but it was refined. Like the
Yeah.
Beatles. like the Beatles got refined, they refined metal, right?
Yeah, it was
And
super melodic.
yeah, they were able to get like the melody into it, and I was like, wow, that's brilliant. And
Hmm.
I was always the kind of guy, I listened to like everything. I listened to Johnny Cash, I listened to Mingus, I listened to like De La Soul. I mean, I listened to anything that's good.
Yeah.
I'm always like a classic guy in terms of rock. I like Zeppelin, like Hendrix. But then
Hmm.
when I heard like heavy metal bands like Metallica, I was like, wow, you know, I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
I just like going anywhere. I mean, I'll go to like a band like Husker Du or the Replacements, like really kind of underground kind of rock bands. But
Yeah.
I that's kind of like my indie heart is I like a guy like Paul Westerberg, and I like his kind of the way he writes for the Replacements. That was always something I thought was really cool because he had this kind of college radio vibe, and he was a big fan of Alex Chilton and Big Star, who I don't know if you ever heard of them, but
I haven't heard of them.
Alex Chilton was a member of the Box Tops, and he did this famous song
Okay.
called "Letter." It's a really famous song. It was like he was a teenager, and then he went and created a band called Big Star. The Big Star sounds like Badfinger. They
Okay.
sound kind of like the Beatles. They're like an American Beatles, but they were in the South and they were on Stax.
That's
And
cool.
and they did this like 3 albums. And Rolling Stone gave them 5 stars for all their albums. They're like a Velvet Underground for 70s power pop.
Wow.
And if you ever listen to them, you ever go check them out, they had like #1 record, Radio City, and then third. And these albums, guys like Paul Westerberg and REM and the Counting Crows like name checked them. The
Wow.
Counting Crows famously name checked Big Star in a bunch of their songs, and that's how I found out about them. And then I went back and got the history. But they were like an unsung band that has brilliant, really beautiful Beatle-esque stuff, and they weren't trying to be the Beatles, but they sounded like unbelievable. They have really beautiful chord arrangements, really good singing. They never really got picked up, but then a lot of people like the Velvet Underground, a lot of indie bands in the 90s name checked them as influences, as an influence.
Wow.
So it's a cool, so it's this kind of shows you like if you believe in what you're doing and you create a good piece of music, it actually can inspire like a whole generation of other musicians.
Absolutely. Even if you like don't end up being as massive as those people, like you directly influenced all of that. And it's actually really beautiful to go back and see that, like in retrospect, like growing up certain artists that came out that they're then influenced a lot of other artists and to see that progression. Because I mean, I'm very young, so I didn't get to see that really past progression happen, but I get to see it now and it's fun. And it's interesting because people get very attached to the past. I feel like the past should always play a part in the present out of like respect, but I also feel like you have to innovate, you have to move forward. It's important to do that, even musically. And Gucci Mane, of all people, was saying, someone was asking about him about newer rappers or like mumble rap. And he said he thinks what they're doing is great because they're doing something new and people have no business turning their nose up to it. Instead, they should work to understand why kids love it, why people love it. Why is this the new thing? Why do people connect with it? And I really love that mindset. I really love the mindset of like, I don't understand it, but this could go on to fuel a new generation of music. So it's like
Yeah.
like I
That's
want to
like,
I
it's
want to
like
get behind it.
yeah, it's like I'm a big fan of like when punk became new romantic and then became new wave, right?
Yeah.
You get bands like the Talking Heads, you get like bands like Joy Division and New Order. They come out of this punk scene from like Johnny Rotten and the Sex Pistols and the Clash, and then they say, let's introduce like progressive rock elements but make it shorter,
Yeah.
right? So let's take ideas from like Yes and Genesis and then funk from like Funkadelic and create
Yeah.
this new wave. And that's what you had in the 80s. You have these
Yeah.
bands that have, new wave bands that weren't just synth bands. If you
Yeah.
listen, they had really good guitar playing, they had really good bass playing. There's a lot of funk inspired parts in these bands.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had a lot of bones to them. And people, oh, they're just keyboard bands. They're like, no, if you actually listen to them, they actually had a lot of skills that were cross genre, and
Yeah.
and a lot of people go back and listen to that stuff. It's like new wave and new romantic stuff is it's all over synth wave. It's all
Yeah.
over a lot of modern synth pop. It's all that stuff from that time period.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Like I love seeing these branches, like the branches of genre, like where it starts and you see that whole tree of how it branches off and you can see those influences. Because even like metal is still so rooted in classical music.
Yeah,
Like listening to those guitar riffs heavily rooted in classical music. It's like you can play those on a piano and make it sound like a
yeah.
classical
It's
masterpiece.
like Bach and Chopin and Beethoven. Man, a lot of these guys they're classically trained or coming from that point of view. You know.
Exactly. It's like they're two sides of the same coin. So it's like when people try to divide genres and be like, no, it's not the same as this and this and this. It's like, no, there is this incredible tree of music where everything is influenced by everything. And sometimes some little band that you didn't expect influences this whole tree. And like, I mean, she's not a small artist, but like, Lana Del Rey, comes
Yeah,
out with this really interesting, like Americana, like almost reminiscent of like the 20s through the 60s, like of music in like 2011, 2012. And it was like we hadn't heard this fusion of like hip hop and like really gorgeous, like 40s styling of instrumental come together before. And she ended up influencing this whole new generation of pop. Like Billie Eilish wouldn't be
yes.
Billie Eilish without Lana Del Rey. You hear that, and there's nothing wrong with that, and they're very different in their own people. But it's just cool to see when one person or like a band is able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, because to me as a songwriter, the one guy I always go back to if I'm trying to see if my lyrics are kind of in the zone is like Dylan. Because if you think about Dylan, the way he crafts the song, he tells stories.
Yeah,
Whether you like his voice or not, his stories are like unbelievable. They're like
yeah,
what you want as a songwriter is to be able to do it like Dylan, but maybe do it with your voice.
yes,
but his structure is so good, and I was listening to like the band, like his
hmm,
the Canadian band that he played with,
yeah,
and the songs they do have this Americana thing that's like it sounds like the best country music you ever heard. It's like it's got this it's hard. And the thing that was really interesting. They're Canadian, but they
yeah,
were channeling this American South concept, and because they
yeah,
were Canadian, they were kind of like romanticizing what they thought the South was about,
yeah,
right? And then they had an interpretation that's different than normal country American music, and so
yeah,
you get this thing that's like I just go to it all the time. It's like this combination of like them being his backup band and they're having this ability to bring in like Lightning Hopkins and all this blues based stuff with this Americana stuff with Dylan's lyricism. And people say, well, what's that got to do with electronic music? And I'm like, well, if you can take some of those ideas and bring them into electronic music, you can have really substantial stuff
yeah.
in terms of what you're trying to get convey. Because if you can tell a story at the level they tell a story, then your audience can get engaged.
No, really, like honestly. And I mean, I went way back. At the beginning of quarantine, I started learning Old English and like I got really into the history of like the Germanic languages and started to listen to like, modern interpretations of the music back then. Like that folk music back then, obviously it's in a different language, but it's so beautiful and like melodically, I'm like, oh my God, I can incorporate this into modern music and it will go seamlessly because it's just all related to itself. And like hearing these really like almost ancestral tones in modern music, I think it pulls something out of everyone. So it's like if you hear something that's reminiscent of classical music and metal, or something that's reminiscent of like blues music 100 years ago in like modern punk or something, it's like, oh wow. Like the way that it's just like it like brings two worlds together and somehow it makes sense.
I think it's a great thing when you're a songwriter and you actually take your influences and they get incorporated into your sound, and it's kind of subconscious. Because
It is subconscious.
I think a lot of times when you're a writer, you take your influences and then you become you, right? But
Yeah.
you take them and like and you bring them in, and it's like I was listening to Van Morrison, and what I love about Van Morrison, he brings us all this Celtic folklore,
Yeah.
and then blues. He brings like he can sing blues as good as any like African American blues singer, but
Yeah.
then he brings this Celtic kind of mysticism
Yeah.
into it, and then it becomes something that's him, because like
Yeah.
nobody else does that, and he has a lot of respect from a lot of blues guys, because Van Morrison doesn't like rip off the blues. He's
Yeah.
inspired by the blues, and then he brings his own thing into it. And so then a lot of blues guys were like, "Yeah, that guy's cool," because he's got it, and he's not
Hmm.
disrespectful, and he's doing it in a really cool way. And we're
Yeah.
like, that's like, to me, like that's when you really got it, when you merge like two cultures like that. That's just so cool.
No, it is, especially when you're giving credence to where it came from. And it's like you said, like not ripping it off, but like you can heavily feel that influence. Like my older music that I made years ago was heavily influenced by blues just because my upbringing, because my family is from the South and like the more southern East Coast, so that was like came through me, but I wasn't intentionally writing blues music. You could just feel it in the way that I was writing. So then I would have like these guys in their 50s and 60s come up to me after I played an open mic, and they're like, when did you learn blues at 17? I'm like, I didn't mean to. It just happened. I don't know.
That's the best way for it to happen. Like if you're not, the blues is like, it's like in you.
Yeah.
So it's like if you feels forced, then the people will tell you.
Yeah. They will tell you. Yeah.
They'll tell
If
you.
anything feels forced, they're like, yeah.
That's not kidding.
Yeah.
But so I'm very happy that we were on the show again. We hit like the hour mark, and
Yes.
yeah, I'm very excited that we were able to do the video version. We're trying
Me
to go
too.
back to everybody we ever did an audio with, and do the video, because we think that this is like the new way to do things.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're just glad that you were able to take this journey with us, and we're happy that we were on the show. And yeah, when you've got your full album out, come back and we'll do like an album release or
That would
EP.
be amazing. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, Cera
Thank
Gibson.
you.
Make sure you click the link tree below. We've been running the whole time, and check out everything she's doing. Download it, go favorite it, subscribe to it. That's what you need to do. If you like a musician, don't just stream it, download it, buy it, go find it, do everything you can, tell everybody about it, like it, make comments about it. That's what you need to do as a fan. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
You've got your marching orders.
Thank you so much.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Bye. Thank you.
Okay.